Our first scriptural reading this morning is from Psalm 50, written by Asaph, but we're reading the interpretation from Laughing Bird this morning. We're reading Psalm 50, verses 1 through 8 and 22 to 23. You, Lord, are the mighty God. Wherever the sun shines, from horizon to horizon, you call the earth to attention. From the spectacular beauty of your holy mountain, you approach us in a blaze of glory. You come with the full fanfare, flashes of fire in front of you, thunderstorming all around you. You call the earth and sky to sit as a jury and set out the charges against your people. You call the accused, those who swore their faithfulness to you and signed themselves to a binding alliance. The whole universe honors you as the judge and affirms the honesty of your court. We belong to you, and you call us to listen. You set out the case against us, your chosen people. You are God, our God. It is not our sacrifices you condemn, the gifts we are constantly offering, but you set us straight in no uncertain terms. We have ignored you, offering gifts instead of ourselves. You warn us that when you pass sentence, there is nowhere to make further appeal. You are honored when we express our gratitude, not when we fob you off with gifts. It is those who get back on the right track who you lead into the land of freedom. Amen. Our second scriptural reading this morning is from the New Testament book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verses 1 through 3 and 8 through 16, and we will be reading from the New Revised Standard Version, updated edition. Now, faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen. Indeed, by faith our ancestors received approval. By faith we understand that the worlds were prepared by the word of God, so that what is seen was made from things that are not visible. By faith Abraham obeyed when he was called to set out for a place that he was to receive as an inheritance, and he set out not knowing where he was going. By faith he stayed for a time in the land he had been promised, as in a foreign land, living in tents, as did Isaac and Jacob, who were heirs with him of the same promise. For he looked forward to the city that has foundations, whose architect and builder is God. By faith, with Sarah's involvement, he received power of procreation, even though he was too old, because he considered him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one person, and this one as good as dead, descendants were born, as many as the stars of heaven and as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. All of these died in faith without having received the promises, but from a distance they saw and greeted them. They confessed that they were strangers and foreigners on the earth, for people who speak in this way make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of the land that they had left behind, they would have had opportunity to return. But as it is, they desire a better homeland, that is, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God. Indeed, he has prepared a city for them. May the Lord bless the reading of his holy word.
I'm always hesitant to do this, Hudson, but I love that you're here today. Hudson Navarro over here remember a couple of months ago I was at Triple Camp up at Community of the Great Commission. I was working with the junior high kids. He was working with the little kids, and I'm so happy he is going to Chico State, and he's here with us this morning. Thank you, Hudson, for being here this morning. Language is a complicated thing, is it not? It is the principal method of human communication. Most of the time we associate language with words, but gestures play an important part, as I demonstrate a lot, right? But let's just stick with words today, okay? What do you think of when you hear the word faith? It's an important word, especially when we're talking about religion, because faith is an element of how Christians express our belief. It's also a loaded word because in English it can mean the belief in something unseen or unproven, but it can also mean other things too. When we look at what the writer of Hebrews defines it as, is, and I've got this memorized in the King James, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not yet seen. Faith can also mean trust in someone or something based on past experiences, like I have faith that I can count on my friend. But what happens when something that we've been hoping for doesn't happen? Or when someone or something that you've always counted on isn't there? When that happens, sometimes we say, I've lost my faith. Anyone ever here been in that situation? If you haven't, I'm impressed. And I also suspect that you're living in some kind of a Matrix-style alternate reality, too, because I don't know a whole lot of people who have friends who haven't let them down or who've received everything that they've ever asked for. So is there anybody here in that situation? No. Good. So let's move on to something else that might challenge our understanding of faith. Trying to communicate what something means in one language to someone who communicates in another language is difficult. Anyone ever use an application like Google Translate, a language application? Google Translate, gotta love it. But I gotta help you recall a story. A lot of you maybe weren't here in 2012, but back in 2012, our church hosted George Ngoka. Does anybody remember George and Gertrude? Yeah. George and Gertrude were global mission partners from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, and George didn't speak English. His language was French. And he was visiting a lot of churches in our region, and so our regional minister, Ben Boren at the time, suggested that we find a French language interpreter to help congregations understand George's presentations. Now, fortunately, Edie Roberts had a friend who was fluent in French, and she agreed to come over and help out. However, I needed to go pick up George and his wife Gertrude from First Christian Church in Sacramento and bring them back here. No problem, right? Because I've got Google Translate on my phone. And it's less than an hour. What could possibly go wrong, right? It's one thing to look at a word and know what it means. And nouns are usually pretty easy. They're pretty straightforward. You got bird, mountain, car. Verbs take a little bit more effort, though. They take a little bit more thought. But they're still manageable, like drive or eat or walk. But some verbs like pursue or endure or manifest, those are harder to translate directly from one language to another. And that's when things get crunchy. Languages vary in how specific or general they are with certain concepts. So let's take the word love, for example. In English, we use the same word, love, whether we're talking about loving our spouse, our friends, or pizza. But in Greek, there are three distinct words for love. One is for the universal, unconditional love, and that's called agape. One is for deep friendships or emotional connections, that's philia. And then there's another for passionate or romantic love, and that's eros. This lack of nuance in English can make translating between languages very difficult. And sometimes it's pretty awkward. And believe me, that's one reason tools like Google Translate often fall short, because translation isn't just about matching words. It requires context and an understanding of the culture behind the language. So believe me, I was happy to get back here to Chico, where Edie's friend could interpret, not just translate, but interpret. In Greek, the word faith is pistis. Now, in the Bible, the way that word is translated, it can mean faith, it can mean trust, it can mean belief, confidence, or loyalty. So our problem as English speakers is that we often have a very narrow definition of faith, which can lead to a serious problem that we've developed lately. Now, sometimes the best way to understand the meaning of a word is by comparing it to its opposite. So, to understand up, you need to know about down. To understand bright, you need to know about dim. So, what happens when we try to define faith in contrast to reason? Often this leads to a distorted view, as if faith is something that kicks in when reason fails. You'll hear people say, well, I don't need evidence or reason, I have faith. But that's flawed thinking. Because in many religious traditions, faith and reason have worked together for centuries. Faith is not the absence of reason. In fact, some of the most important breakthroughs in science and mathematics have come from people whose faith fueled their curiosity about the world. Take not like Al, like Alan, Al-Khwarizmi, who was a devout Muslim, and his belief in a rational creator led him to develop algebra and lay the foundations for algorithms, which help us predict weather. They help us measure climate change. And then there's Jonas Salk. He was a Jewish scientist who created the polio vaccine, and he was inspired to do this by the Jewish concept of, let's see if I can remember, Tikkun Olam, which means repairing the world. Even Charles Darwin, who studied theology and was raised in the Church of England, found his early sense of wonder in creation to be the driving force behind his work on evolution. Wait a minute, Pastor, are you trying to be sneaky here? You're telling me that the father of algebra, whose work helped scientists track planetary motion, which eventually allowed astrophysicists to prove that the earth revolves around the sun and not the other way around, which, by the way, seems contradictory to the biblical account of cosmology in Genesis. He was a person of faith. Yep, Muslim faith, but yeah. And you're saying that the person behind one of the greatest medical breakthroughs in history, the development of the polio vaccine, was motivated by his religious convictions? Yep. And here's the big one. You're telling me that Charles Darwin, the arch enemy of biblical literalists, proposed the theory of evolution not because he wanted to destroy faith, but because he was so captivated by the wonder of creation that he wanted to understand how it all worked? Yes. And get this, their discoveries didn't destroy their faith one bit. In fact, if anything, it increased their faith. So, Pastor, are you seriously telling us that science and faith can coexist? Yes. Are you telling us that maybe science and religion aren't enemies or even competing worldviews? Yes. That's exactly what I'm saying. In fact, I'd go even further. Faith was never meant to be anti-reason. At its best, faith involved reason trust, grounded in evidence, experience, and yes, even revelation. Well, geez, Pastor, no need to get all heretical on us here. But here's the truth. I know many of you are here today because we don't ask you to check your brain at the door when you come into the sanctuary. You are here because we value faith-seeking understanding. Not blind allegiance, not fear-based certainty. What's sad is that sometimes it feels like churches like ours are the exception and not the rule. As I said a few weeks ago, the opposite of faith is not doubt. It's certitude. It's certainty. When a person says, I believe that the world was made in 7 literal days because that's what it says in Genesis 1, that is not a statement of faith at all. That is not a statement of faith. It is a statement of certitude. Because what the person is really saying is, I am so certain that the Bible is correct when it says the earth was created in 7 literal days. You can't convince me otherwise with your so-called evidence. Now, a statement of faith would be the vast expanse of the knowledge that we have gained since recorded history points to overwhelming evidence that the earth started its formation around 4.5 billion years ago, and humans have existed on this planet for somewhere around 100 to 150,000 years. This presents a different cosmology than the Bible, but you know what? I'm okay with it. I am okay with it because it doesn't change the way I connect with God. I have faith that even if the earth wasn't created in 7 literal days, I will still love my God with all my heart, with all my soul, with all my mind and my strength. And in addition to this, I will love my neighbor as myself because that's what Jesus teaches me to do. And I will endeavor to live my life in a way that reflects Jesus' life because I am a Christian. 7 days or 4.5 billion years, it does not matter. That is a statement of faith. We in the Christian church, disciples of Christ, are what some have called faith-seeking understanding. In other words, faith comes first. But as we gain knowledge through our interaction with our world and beyond, our faith remains. Could you imagine what the church could have accomplished over the centuries if we just embraced that model of thinking rather than digging in our heels and treating faith and reason like they're mortal enemies? A lot of time, resources, and energy have been wasted trying to argue over something that's not even worth arguing about. But that's me. Let's talk about some of the folks that the writer of Hebrew lists. For the sake of brevity, Gene only read verse 1 and 3 and then 8 through 16. But in this entire chapter, the writer presents a huge list of people who had heroic measures of faith. Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Jacob, Moses, Barak, Samson, David, Samuel, and all of the prophets. These were people who by faith accomplished amazing things that made it possible for people to stay connected with God. And not once did this list mention anything about these people digging in their heels and refusing to let go of old paradigms and obsessively arguing about how right they are. It's the opposite of that. These were people who faced incredibly trying times where they weren't even sure what they should do or where they should go or how they should respond to situations beyond their control. They didn't have to bear down and dig in. They let go and trusted that God had their best interests in mind. Now, I'm not always a big fan of pithy little sayings about, relating to faith, but you know what? I got one that I love, and that is let go and let God. Love that one because it takes faith to let go. So, here's the question for us today. If faith is not blind allegiance or stubborn certainty, but reasoned trust in the God who loves us, what might that look like in our lives this week? See, maybe it means loosening your grip on the old arguments and reaching instead for the hands of your neighbor. Maybe it means holding the tension between what we know and what we don't know and trusting that God is present in both. Maybe it means remembering that faith is not about winning debates, but about living in such a way that people see the life of Jesus in you. Friends, Hebrews, this book that Gene read from, tells us that faith is the assurance of things hoped for and the conviction of things not seen. And we are part of a long line of people who have walked that road before us. They didn't get there by clinging to fear or fighting for certitude. They got there by trusting God enough to take the next step. So, may we be people who let go of our need to be right and take hold of the grace that sets us free. May we walk forward in faith, thinking deeply, loving fully, and trusting boldly.